Good evening and welcome to Nothing But the Truth. I'm your host, Trudy Stern. When people think about politics, they usually think about Washington. But here in New York, the decisions that affect your life are made in Albany, in the state assembly. The assembly decides our rent laws, it shapes bail and criminal justice policy, it sets taxes, it determines school funding, it affects how businesses operate in the financial capital of the world. If you live here, work here, own a business here, raise a family here, what happens in that chamber matters most. And right now, the makeup of that assembly is changing. The Democratic Socialists of America, working closely with the Working Families Party, have made it their strategy to win assembly seats one at a time. Not loudly, not all at once, but district by district, race by race, shifting the balance of power inside the Democratic Party itself. When they win more seats, they gain more influence. And when they gain more influence, they shape policy in very concrete ways. On housing, that means pushing for stricter rent freezes and expanded rent control policies, limiting landlord flexibility and placing heavier mandates on private development. Policy supporters say protect tenants, but critics argue discouraging new housing construction and investment. On criminal justice, it means continuing to expand bail reform, limiting pretrial detention, reducing traditional policing structures, and shifting more resources away from law enforcement and towards alternative response programs. On taxes and business policy, it means supporting higher taxes on high earners and corporations, increasing regulatory requirements, and adopting policies that prioritized redistribution over economic competitiveness in a state that depends heavily on its financial and business sectors. And on Israel and anti-Semitism, it means backing resolutions and rhetoric aligned with the more activist wing of the party, including support among some members of that coalition for BDS-related positions and criticism of a state cooperation with Israel in ways that many in the Jewish community find deeply concerning. Assembly District 69 is one of those races. Stephanie Ruskay is running against Eli Northrup, a Working Families Party-backed candidate whose platform reflects that wing of the party. New York is home to the largest Jewish community outside of Israel. The state assembly votes on funding priorities, public policy, and resolutions directly affecting how that state addresses anti-Semitism and engages with Israel. This is not theoretical, it is real. This race is not about party labels. Both candidates are Democrat. It's about whether Albany continues moving toward the Working Families Party wing of the Democratic Party, or whether it returns to a more balanced, pragmatic approach that has historically defined New York governance. In many ways, this is a fight over the soul and direction of the Democratic Party in New York. Because when the assembly changes, New York changes. Stephanie Ruskay joins us tonight to talk about what's at stake. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Hello, Trudy. Thanks for having me.
Wow, it is a very big race that you've entered into. And I'd love to get a little bit of a flavor for who you are and why you're in this race. So tell us our listeners about yourself in terms of where you grew up and what you do, what you've done before this point.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm a rabbi right now. I am a rabbi. I work at the Jewish Theological Seminary. I'm the Associate Dean of the Rabbinical School. But I was born on 97th Street between Central Park West and Columbus in a Mitchell-Lama building, which was a plan that meant to help families, working families, be able to live in New York City. I went to Ramaz until I was 7, and my husband did also. We met many years later, but I loved New York City. My parents left because they felt that they wanted to have more children, a backyard, and couldn't afford day school for 3 children. And we moved to Mayapack, an hour north of New York City. I came back as soon as I could. I felt like my heart was here. I came for college. I went to Columbia and JTS, and I've been here my whole adult life. I'm 51. aside from when I lived in Israel and when I traveled. And like, this is my home. So I am a community organizer by nature and by training. I love to do things together with other people. I think that's how there's nothing more exciting to me than making society better and doing it alongside other people to do something none of us could do by ourselves. So
Amazing.
that's like a flavor of who I am. We live on the Upper West Side, my husband and I, and we have twin boys who are 15 years old. They've been to day school and now they're in public school. So I have seen and experienced both. In general, I feel like you can't live all your values at once all the time. And so we decided to root them in Jewish day school and then sort of become part of the public school system.
It's really incredible. You seem like you've experienced so much of the district that you're running for. You grew up there, then you came back, you went to school there, college, and now you're raising your family there, and you've experienced both different types of schools, as you've just mentioned. So it seems like you're coming to the equation with a lot of experience. But before I get to that, I just want to ask you about growing up and your household growing up. So
Yeah,
was your household growing up a politically active household?
no. It was civically engaged. My parents were very involved in our synagogue. I would say our shul was like when we moved to Mayapack, that was the center of our lives. We spent all our time there. And that's really why I became a rabbi, because the rabbi and the community made it possible for kids to really see themselves as leaders there. And we were there. So I felt the first, oh, somebody, a friend of mine's mother, when I was a kid, said to me, I think you're going to be the first woman president of the United States. And I thought, like, when I think about that story, why it's important to me is because somebody saw me as a leader and told me that they saw big things for me. I didn't think I was going to be the first female president of the United States, but it was like, oh, you could have a bigger life. And that happened at shul. So my mom was a teacher. She taught in the public school system in New York City until she got pregnant with me. When she got pregnant with me, she decided to stay at home and raise the kids. And when I was 17, I think she went back to work, which was really good because my father he sold industrial food service equipment to schools and prisons and all kinds of institutions. And he died very young. He died when he was 52. So it was very good that my mother went back to work because she needed to have an income once he died. But my dad, I will just say, like, he was a person who modeled being a mensch, who held the door for everybody, who looked every salesperson in the eye and asked them how was their day. When he went to visit his customers, they were never the person who had the most institutional power. They were the purchasing agent in the institution. He treated them with the utmost respect. I loved when he brought me to work and he would walk in and say, "Here's my boss." That was me. And like it just, I would say my parents both instilled in me a commitment to be sort of the best version of a citizen that you could be. And you never knew what that was going to look like. But my mom was really involved in the Hebrew school board at our synagogue. It was like, you just got involved. And my father said to us when we were kids, he would say to us on a regular basis, "What did you do today to make the world safe for democracy?" Which is kind of a crazy thing to say to young kids. And I think it was really a slogan he heard somewhere in an advertisement, but it became a regular mantra in our house. And he expected an answer. So it might have, like, I think it was a stand in for what's a good thing you did today to make the world better. But when I was a kid, democracy seemed like it was totally fine and on the ascent. And I would say today, I feel worried about authoritarianism. I feel worried about protecting democracy. And so to me, making the world safe for democracy means running for office because you can make a difference in Albany because everything in our lives gets voted on there.
Really unbelievable. Your dad seems like he was a very special person who really taught you respect for others. That seems to come across really well in your story that he respected all of the members of the businesses that he sold to, whether they were the boss or whether they were the selling agent, buying
Yeah.
agent. So that's such a great value and one that I think in today's world is not so common anymore. And from what we all hear about what goes on in the state assembly, it's extremely polarized, and there doesn't seem to be much respect, for the other perspective.
Yeah.
Um, in your community before this moment, have you been involved other than being a rabbi? Which,
Yes. So
which I say other than being a rabbi, but meanwhile, being a rabbi is extremely involved.
yes.
So,
Uh, Look, I train rabbinical and cantorial and education students. That's my role at part of my role at JTS alongside the rest of our team. And I also lead our Center for Ethics and Justice. And so that center has an action component and an academic component, and I really run the action component. So I work very closely with the clergy at Riverside Church, Union Theological Seminary, Auburn Seminary, the Interfaith Center of New York, and the Episcopal Diocese of New York. And those are colleagues who we meet regularly, and we met regularly really kind of out of a crisis of feeling like we needed to work together in this neighborhood. So in 2017, we got together related to the Muslim ban, and we felt like we wanted to model something different in the world, faith leaders coming together to say, we're not going to do a ban based on religion. And and we sort of walked around this neighborhood together. Um, and then it was COVID, and then it was the war, and we kind of disconnected for lots of different reasons. We disconnected during COVID because everybody was in their private version of isolation, but we didn't get back together as soon as we came back to the office because of the war. And at some point, I started walking around saying to people, don't you think we should just be talking to each other, even though I know we don't share the same opinion about the war? I think we're never going to heal if we don't talk to each other. And we're not modeling for students what it means to talk to people who you disagree with. And so I met a couple of people who thought that was a good idea. And we've been Zooming every single Friday morning since for a year and a half. And we started doing different kinds of gatherings related to democracy. So every Monday at Columbus Circle, we have a multi-faith Mondays vigil for democracy. And it's a half an hour. It's a little like Kiddush. You come, you see people who have now become familiar to you across faith and race lines. And we gather and we remind ourselves that we care about democracy and passersby. And I think that's being a rabbi also. I think that I always say to our students, of course, the people who hire you who are in your congregation are very important stakeholders and you attend to them. And also you find out who are the other local clergy. You go meet the police, you go meet the fire chief, you go meet the local nonprofits that do important civic engagement work, and you become a pillar of the community. And that is part of a religious expression. If we take seriously seeing everybody made in the image of God, if we take seriously caring for the orphan and the widow, like our texts tell us, you got to be involved in society. So you can't only stay within the four walls of your shul. You got to get out there. I want to model that here for them as part of their education.
what is your district comprised of, or this district that you're running for?
Well, geographically, it's from 80th Street to 125th Street on the west side, although it has odd lines. Maybe we can put a link to the map in the show notes. But look, I would say there's a very diverse Jewish community. There are a few different public housing complexes. There are some Michelama buildings. It's really diverse. It tends to skew more senior and female. And it's a really interesting district. And I will say, as I hope I am communicating, I truly value the opportunity to know people that I don't know before and not just people who share my same opinions. And it's been an enormous blessing for me to meet so many people in the district who I didn't know before and to really work alongside them. And one of the things that I really hope will be true about my campaign and then my actually functioning as an assembly member is I want to be a person who builds bridges and who brings people together. We had a house party where all these people in the same apartment building came. And at the end, they said, oh, we should really have Shabbos dinner together. None of these people knew each other when they walked in the door, but they all had Shabbos and they all lived in the same apartment building, but they don't take the same elevator up. So they never met each other. So I have also had people in the same house party, some of whom think that this is the best moment in New York that they've ever felt hope in their whole adult life, and some of whom feel really terrified about what's ahead as Jews. And for those people to hear each other in the same house party and carry each other's stories with them, to me feels like that is the way forward. Like not isolation and separation and ostracization because you don't share the same politics. Like we have to talk to each other. And I think because I value um, being in relationship with different people so highly, I think that I am the right person who could foster an opportunity to bring people together consistently. And I think our district would be different.
Well, I think you really know your district because you not only live in your district, but you work in your district also, and probably uh, commute in your district, going from your home to your job. So you really come in contact with so many people in the district, and you understand the problems, the issues that face the district, as well as the positives. So you really can represent those issues better than a person like Eli Northrup, who he just moved to the district, right? He wasn't a person who lived in the district before running for office. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, I believe he moved in like between the last election and this one. He was adjacent, but he has moved closer.
So you
Yes, but
really,
I've lived here my whole adult. I have lived here a long time. I'll tell you one thing that is just a small example. I go to the public library in Morningside on 114th and Broadway, and this summer they closed it for painting, and so we needed to go to the Bloomingdale Library on 100th Street. And the Bloomingdale Library has a book drop, but it also shares a campus with a health clinic, and it's across the street from a police station. And when the health clinic is closed, they close the gate. And the book drop is very far. You would have to jump over the gate and walk a little bit of a distance in order to get to the book drop on Sunday, for instance, when they're not open. And it drove me crazy. And I was convinced I was going to change this whole situation because why would you have a book drop if it wasn't available to the people? The whole point of a book drop is when the library is not open. And I went into the police station and I went into the health clinic and I went into the library and I kept asking everybody, don't you think it's crazy that there's no way to return books when the library is closed? And and then I would talk to everybody in the neighborhood about it. And they said, yeah, we're getting a lot of calls. So lucky for them, our library opened before I got to really launch my whole campaign. But it's a little bit of an example of both how I know the community. I live here and experience the same inconveniences that other people do. And I don't just say like, oh, wouldn't it be great if it opened? I start asking everybody and agitating.
well, it really is remarkable how deeply connected to this district you are. You know everything about it, and that is fantastic because you would be so well voiced and well placed to represent the needs of this district. Let's start to talk about the real issues facing this district. So, public safety. Let's talk about safety. What are your thoughts about what's going on right now? Current bail laws, are they working? Um, what are your thoughts about what we can do for safety?
Look, I think you have to talk to the people always. My primary belief in life, I think, is that people know their lives and their sorrows and their hopes and their dreams better than anybody else. So I would want to look at places where people feel particularly unsafe and talk to people sort of at all parts of that equation. Who is walking down the street and feels unsafe? Who is being experienced as menacing and why? I don't think anybody just or very few people naturally decide to be disruptors and intimidators and like people do it when they feel desperate. And so you simultaneously have to sort of have enough eyes on the street. I think a combination of police and social workers, but definitely also like definitely police. But I think you add social workers to the mix, and hopefully by going around together, they help shape each other's understanding of the world, and they interact with people, and you figure out who should tap in on a particular situation because it requires their skills. And um and you really like, so you make it safe in the moment, but you also ask root cause questions about why is somebody here. No one is dealing drugs because they think that's the best thing to do in the world. They're doing it because they don't have another way to make an income. And so I think we have to simultaneously be asking about root causes while also sort of addressing issues on the spot. And I think you have to have community policing. Like, I went to something at Frederick Douglass. There was a tenant leader. It's one of the NYCHA housing complexes in the district. They had an incredible Three Kings celebration. There was a toy they collected all these toys for kids in the community. They had haircutters there, like, come get a haircut, come watch a play, come take toys for your children and winter clothing. And the police were there, and the police helped do the drive, and they were also present and smiling. And the idea was to not make them sort of outsiders who nobody would want to talk to, but actually to make them insiders so that there is a direct line of communication. I think community work, even though we live in an internet age, there is no substitution for knowing people face to face, being proximate to each other. And so you don't move people around all the time. You have them in a community where they can really establish ties.
Do you believe in fully funding the police?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to housing and affordability. What do you feel about the housing and affordability issue, particularly in your district?
Well, so one of the things that got me into this race is our rent went up. And it is not that I begrudge our landlord from collecting rent, but we don't have any more money. And I feel like our rent has been going up and up and up. My husband and I both work in nonprofits, and there's not more money. So, and there's no housing. There's a 1.2% vacancy rate on the West Side. So if you think you're a West Sider and your rent has gone beyond your means, there's nowhere to go. You're not going to be a West Sider anymore. So, and it is a national crisis. It is not only an Upper West Side problem, but I am not in a position to make a sort of whole housing change in the whole country. I am in a position to sort of take responsibility for part of stewarding more housing in our district. And I think that you have to pilot lots of different kinds of solutions to things, and then you figure out which ones work and you do more of them. And that's how we're going to get more housing in this country. But I think we need true affordable housing. We need housing that working people like us can afford. And we need more. When there's more opportunity for people to move around. I also think it's incredibly unhealthy for a neighborhood for nobody to be able to move in or out. It just, like, you don't get fresh ideas. You don't, like, it just doesn't feel vibrant. So you need, and in addition, it's like nobody's children could possibly move back here if there's absolutely no apartments for them to rent or buy. So if we want to have families be able to be close together, if we want new people to be able to move in, we just need more.
So how do you think rent freezes would solve a housing crisis? I know that
I,
that
yeah,
is a
yes,
popular thought.
I know. And it's a slogan that sounds very good. As I said earlier, I really believe in talking to every person in a 360-degree radius around an issue. And so I would want to hear from tenants, okay, how do your finances work and what would a rent freeze mean to you? But also to the person who owns the building, how do your finances work and how would a rent freeze impact you? I have come to hear from people who are pro housing that if you freeze the rent, you're going to have a big problem on the part of the people who own the building because insurance will still go up and taxes will still go up, and like there's a lot of things that are going to be increased costs, and how are they going to actually fix anything in the building? And you don't want the end result to be that owners abandon the buildings or don't fix anything. Like, nobody's looking. We don't want life to get worse. We want it to get better for everybody. So I think that there has to be sort of more discussion and a plan for how do you help the people who run those buildings both be able to like break even and maybe make a living and fix the things that inevitably go wrong. I'll tell you, in our building, over the weekend, like our toilet tank just cracked. It just cracked and started pouring water everywhere. And like that could happen in any apartment. And if it happens in an apartment where the owner does not have any money or any incentive to fix anything, like our bathroom situation would be terrible as an ongoing. I know they're going to fix it. But if I lived in a building where they were not fixing anything, I'd be very unhappy.
Well,
So,
what I love about your whole perspective is that you don't demonize anyone. You hear so much demonization of landlords and people who own these buildings, and I think it's really grounded that you understand that they, need to make a living also, and within reason, and that they needs to make sense for them to own the building while at the same time you can sympathize and understand so deeply because you are one of the tenants in these buildings.
yeah.
So I think that understanding of both sides of an equation and not demonizing either side is so refreshing to hear. And I think that, hopefully people listening to this will understand what a great perspective that is to bring to Albany, to be able to actually be a builder of something as opposed to just a crashing down person who wants to destroy. It sounds very sexy when you demonize one perspective, but the truth of the matter is it's just destructive and it's not productive at all. And I feel like your perspective is so refreshing. So thank you so much for that. With regard to uh, taxes in this district, so I know that there's a lot of tax the rich on the part of our new mayor. What are your thoughts on that?
I think tax the rich is an othering, ostracizing, and combative thing to say. Like, I think we should be talking about our values. What do we value in society? I think my dignity is degraded if there are people out on the sidewalk lying all over the place who can't afford a safe and warm place to live. Like I have a stake in that, and I am a worse human if like that's the society that I'm satisfied to live in. And I don't think I'm unusual in that. I think probably almost all people, no matter their financial resources, feel that way. So I think we have to be talking about who do we want to be as a society, and then how do we get there? And so when we know who we want to be, then we say, okay, with the budget as we have it, how are we spending the money? And are we accomplishing our goals? That you always say, look at the finances and the books, and then you'll know what somebody cares about. So if we're paying for things that are not what we say we care about, then either we don't care about them or we shouldn't be spending that money. And, you know, when the Mishkan was built, the idea was people would bring gifts from their heart. And it's hard to count on and make a budget for gifts from people's hearts that they are moved to make. But it is true that I think almost every human, even the people with the most money, would say, society's not how I want it to be. And I have no happiness or joy that there are people living in poverty. I would want to be a part of making a society where people have enough. And so enough to live. And so I think that if we speak differently about it, there is a way in which if we had alignment around where are we going and who do we want to be in the world as a state, then you figure out like, is there any more money that could be put in and where would it come from? But I think yelling tax the rich is not going to make anybody feel more generous, more welcome, or more like they're part of the solution. They'll feel defensive and like they want to like withdraw and not contribute. And I don't think that helps anybody.
Well, that sounds like a perspective that would be very helpful. I don't know how far you're going to get with that one, but that sounds like a
Well, the good thing about me is I am kind of relentless and I'll keep saying it and I'll say it everywhere. And I always say to our students, if you're not talking about it, you're definitely not fixing it. So you got to talk about it. Talking about it is the first step to being able to change a culture.
So Stephanie, New York is home to the largest Jewish community outside of Israel. But yet, since 10/7, there have been a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism. Can you speak to that?
I would say there's no room in this city or this state for anti-Semitism or bias against any community. And we need to remind ourselves of that and insist upon it. That's not the community, and it's not the New York that I grew up in and that I lived in until October 7th. I would say this is a place where there's appreciation for multiple cultures and faith traditions and people living as they are and sharing that with each other. And since the war began, there is a lot of trepidation by many Jews to share that they're Jewish, especially college students meeting each other for the first time, to talk about a connection to Israel. It's like, and if you stifle yourself, then you don't really know people. And I will say, we are going to pay as a society for training a generation of college students to either hide who they are, be embarrassed about who they are, or judge each other and ostracize each other for who they are. So I think it is a moment that I never thought would be here, that in 2026, we have to say anti-Semitism is acts of anti-Semitism are forbidden or bias against any community. And so we have to be attentive to it, because when you let it go, then it festers and suddenly becomes acceptable. And we have to educate and we have to enforce that it's unacceptable to behave that way.
Do you believe that New York should maintain strong economic and institutional ties with Israel?
Yes, yes.
It sounds like a ridiculous question.
I know.
However, the mayor is starting to cut those ties and has begun already. So I'd love to hear your view on that.
No, like, I think he would have much more power and influence if he went to the stakeholders that he's tempted to cut and said to them, and first of all, got to know them, and second of all, said his concerns to them, and they built a relationship. I think that would be much more effective than canceling people that he doesn't know and who don't know him. I think it creates more drama and more difficulty, and I don't think it makes the world better. All those institutions are contributing to New York State, to the economy, to sort of the society. So no, I think, like, you relate, you don't cancel.
What role do you think the state assembly should play in addressing the rising anti-Semitism?
Well, I think one thing should be um, education. I mean, the amount that people don't know in society about Jewish people is tremendous. So first of all, it's on us to create some sort of opportunity for people to know us. But Albany could be part of that. It should be true that public school kids and private school kids, all kids, should have education about what are various religious traditions, including Judaism, but not only. But we're talking about Judaism. Like, there should be education in every school. And there should be, like, I'm really interested in this, and I have not seen a lot of work on it, but like, there are lots of reasons that lots of families opt in to do it in school. However, by taking ourselves out of the public school system, we reduce the opportunity for people to know each other, because school is all encompassing. Shul is all encompassing. Like, you could have your whole Jewish life. And if we think it's important for people to know us, we have to think about, how do we create opportunities to be part of secular society also? Because people will guess about you and demonize you if they don't know. But Albany could make it part of a curriculum, and Albany could make educator sort of professional development opportunities to expand people's own knowledge. Those
Great.
are a couple of ideas.
I think that's a really great suggestion. I would love to see that happen. Um, Sadly, we are at the end of our time together, Stephanie. So I have one last question for you. If the voters listening tonight remember one thing about you when they go into the voting booth, what would you like that to be?
I think it would be that all of us have the obligation to answer the call, what did you do today to make the world safe for democracy? And that if you vote for me, you are going to have a relentless worker for democracy. And And I will do it in partnership with you. Like this is just the beginning of a relationship. I would say the part of the job I'm actually incredibly excited about is constituent services. It's like when you get to know your people and you really know them and you bring them together, like that's what you'll get with me.
So I think that you bring a tremendous amount of uh, professionalism to this role that you are seeking. I think it's amazing that that you grew up in the neighborhood, that you moved back to the neighborhood, that you work in the neighborhood. I think you really know the neighborhood inside out, and the job that you have as both an educator and as a clergy member really reinforces the notion that you are a community builder and that you are a person who works across the aisle and you're a person who really reaches out to everyone and wants to understand their needs and their wants and working towards making their lives better within that structure. So I think tonight's conversation was really important, Stephanie. And you also remind us that assembly races don't dominate the national headlines, but they quietly determine the direction of our state and our lives. The future of New York won't be changed in one sweeping moment, but it will change incrementally, one assembly seat at a time. And each seat aligned with the DSA platform moves that state closer to a very different vision of what New York should be and is. That's why this race matters, not just for one district, but for the broader direction of Albany and the character of the Democratic Party in this state. Stephanie Ruskay, thank you for joining us tonight, for stepping forward into public service, and for sharing your vision with our listeners. We wish you strength and success in the weeks ahead, and good luck on this important race.
Thank you, Trudy. It was great to be together.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy, and you can catch us every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. on the radio. If you missed any part of this show or want to listen to any of our past episodes, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.